Welcome back to Dark Horror Stories. Tonight, we're heading where the maps stop being confident. Desert backroads with no lights, no cell service, and the kind of quiet that feels like it's listening back. In today's episode, I'm sharing 9 true disturbing stories from desert backroads. These are tales of people who ventured into empty miles and found something they were never meant to see. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button and let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Story 1. There's a certain kind of desert road that doesn't feel like a road so much as a suggestion. You know what I mean? 2 pale tire tracks through grit and calichy little rocks that tick your undercarriage like impatient fingernails, and a horizon that stays the same no matter how long you drive. The first time I took that back way, the sun was low and mean, turning everything copper. My truck's AC had this sour smell, like old gym socks, so I kept the vents low and just dealt with it. The steering wheel was hot enough to sting. I brought a thermos of coffee that tasted faintly of burnt plastic because the lid didn't fit right anymore, and every time I took a sip I told myself I should stop being cheap and buy a new one. I was out there because I'd gotten stubborn. That's the honest reason. A friend of a friend had told me there was an old line shack, nothing special, just a little cinder block box from the ranching days, sitting off a feeder road about 40 minutes from the highway. He said it was abandoned, had a decent roof, and sometimes people used it as a windbreak if they got caught out there. I wasn't planning to camp in it exactly. I just wanted to see something that wasn't another gas station or another beige strip mall. I'd been working long shifts, sleeping weird hours, feeling like my life was made of fluorescent lighting. So I took a half day, filled up the tank, threw a tarp, a sleeping pad, and a cheap cooler in the bed, and told myself it would be a little solo reset. A quiet night under stars. No people, no notifications, maybe some coyotes yipping in the distance, the kind of sound that makes you grin if you've got a warm jacket and a full belly. I think it was a Tuesday, or maybe Wednesday. I remember because the gas station clerk had this midweek brain melt look on his face, and I'd made a joke about it and he didn't laugh. Just blinked at me like I'd spoken another language. On the way out, I stopped at a roadside place with faded red letters on the window and bought 2 burritos wrapped in foil, plus a bag of ice that was already melting through the plastic. I also grabbed a cheap pack of jerky I didn't even want, just because it felt like the responsible thing to do. My phone had 2 bars when I turned off the highway, then 1, then it did that thing where it pretends it has service for a second and then gives up. The dirt road got narrower. The washboard rattled my teeth. The desert on both sides looked empty in a way that isn't actually empty. Little clumps of scrub, the occasional twisted tree that looked like it grew out of spite, rocks the size of coolers, lizards darting like quick thoughts. Every so often I'd see a fence line, sagging wire that caught the light. The sky had that huge dome feeling, and I remember thinking, this is what people mean when they say, out here. Like you can't hide from the world, but the world also can't find you. About, I don't know, maybe 20 minutes in, I saw something that made me ease off the gas without meaning to. A single boot print in the dust, dead center in the track, just one, crisp as if it had been stamped. Deep heel, toe scuff, the whole thing. And the weird part wasn't that someone had been out there. People go places. The weird part was there weren't any other prints around it, none beside it, none behind it. It wasn't like a person walked across. It was just there, like someone had stepped down from the sky and then vanished again. I stared at it through the windshield for longer than I want to admit. My first thought was, okay, wind erased the rest. The desert does that. It smooths things over. A gust can make a whole story disappear. I told myself that, and I believed it, mostly. Still, I got out, mostly because I wanted to feel less spooked by doing something normal, like examining a boot print. The air was hot and smelled like dry stone. When I crouched, I could see fine dust collecting in the edges of the print like flour. The tread looked old-fashioned, not cowboy boot exactly, more like a work boot but with a strange pattern, too smooth in some places, too sharp in others. I stood up and looked around. Nothing but flat land and scrub and the road stretching behind me. No cars, no voices. My own truck made ticking sounds as it cooled, and the sound felt louder than it should have. I got back in and drove on. I'm telling you this because that was the first little tug on the thread. At the time I thought it was a funny thing I could tell someone later. Hey, I saw a boot print in the middle of nowhere, like it was a quirky desert detail. I wasn't scared yet, but I also wasn't relaxed anymore. My shoulders stayed up around my ears, and I kept checking the mirrors like I expected to see someone jogging behind me, which is ridiculous. No one jogs out there, not in that heat. Eventually, the feeder road split. There was no sign, just two choices, one track slightly more used than the other. I stopped and got out again because my sense of direction is optimistic. I like to think I'm good at it. I walked a few steps down each branch, looking for something, anything, that matched what I'd been told. When you see the rock that looks like a dog's head, take the right. That kind of instruction. I did find a rock that looked vaguely like a dog's head if you squinted and tried to be generous, so I took the right. The sun was sinking fast now, and the light changed from harsh to theatrical. Long shadows. The desert got quieter. Even the wind seemed to get tired. That's when I started noticing the birds, or rather the lack of them. Earlier there had been little movements, wings flicking, tiny chirps. Now there was nothing, no calls, no flutter, just silence and the faraway hiss of my tires. I told myself it was normal. Birds settle, night comes, desert animals get cautious. All of that is true, but the silence felt arranged, like a room after someone stops talking when you walk in. A few minutes later, I saw the lined shack. It wasn't cinder block like I'd expected. It was older. A low, squat structure of sun-bleached wood and corrugated metal, the roof patched with different colored sheets like a bad quilt. One small window dark, a door hanging slightly open. The place sat in a shallow dip, as if the earth had tried to swallow it and failed. I pulled up and killed the engine. The quiet rolled in immediately, thick and heavy. The heat held on, but the air was starting to lose that baked smell and turn cooler, metallic. I sat there with my hands on the wheel, watching the shack. I don't know why I didn't just leave. I could have. The road was still behind me, the sky still had light, but something about being tired and wanting this to be a thing I did made me stubborn. I remember thinking I drove all the way out here. I'm not going to let a creepy-looking shed ruin my night, so I got out, grabbed my flashlight, and walked up. Closer, I could see the door wasn't just open. It was warped, bowed outward, like something had pressed from the inside for a long time. The hinges were rusted. There were scratch marks on the threshold, thin, shallow lines like someone had dragged a bundle of wire across it. I told myself it was animals, a javelina, a kite trying to get in for shade. Maybe someone used the place as a latrine and raccoons had scratched around. Desert logic, practical logic. I pushed the door with the back of my hand. It creaked and gave, opening into a single room that smelled like dry rot and mouse droppings. The floor was dirt, packed hard. There was an old cot frame without a mattress and a shelf nailed to one wall with a few glass shards on it. Someone had painted something on the metal roof support beam, just a smear of black, not words. I shone my flashlight and saw it was ash, rubbed on by a hand. There were finger streaks in it. My first irrational thought was, someone was here recently. The second thought was, stop being dramatic. I set my cooler just inside the doorway and stepped in. The temperature dropped a few degrees, enough to raise goosebumps on my forearms. My flashlight beam caught dust motes. The place felt to hell, like the air didn't circulate. I walked to the back corner and found a little pile of things, a cracked plastic comb, an empty can of beans, and a single children's shoe. A tiny sneaker, sun-faded pink, half buried in dust. That made my mouth go dry. Not because I thought there was a kid out there, just because it didn't belong. It felt like a wrong object in a wrong place, like finding a birthday candle in a graveyard. I backed out and decided, fine, I won't sleep inside. I'll camp near it, use it as a windbreak like planned. I was still trying to keep the night normal. I dragged my sleeping pad and tarp out, set them a few yards from the shack, and started going through my little routine. It's funny what you remember. I remember the top smelled like vinyl and sunscreen. I remember I had sand in my socks already and it annoyed me more than it should have. I remember opening one burrito and realizing the cheese had congealed into a single rubbery sheet, and I ate it anyway, standing up because sitting felt too vulnerable. The first truly strange thing happened when it got dark enough that the stars popped out. I heard a voice, not a howl or an animal call. A voice, close enough to make out the shape of words, but not close enough to understand them. It came from the direction of the road, maybe 100 yards out, just a low, steady murmur like someone talking to themselves. My heart started doing that quick, stupid rhythm. I froze with half a burrito in my hand, then my rational brain kicked in. It's someone else, another camper, a ranch hand, a lost driver on the road talking on a phone. Out here, sound travels weirdly. It could be farther than it seems, so I called out, "Hey!" and immediately hated the way my voice sounded. Thin and too loud. The talking stopped, like someone had hit mute. I waited, no response. I told myself they didn't hear me or they didn't want to talk. People are weird, I'm weird. I went back to eating, forcing my jaw to work even though the burrito tasted like cardboard and salt. A couple minutes later, the voice started again, closer. And this is where I almost lied to you because it sounds theatrical. But I swear on whatever you swear on, the voice wasn't random anymore. It was repeating a phrase in the same cadence over and over, like someone trying to memorize something. It sounded like my own voice, not exactly like a recording played through a cheap speaker. Flat, wrong around the edges, but the pitch and the little hitch I have when I'm unsure, it was close enough to make my stomach drop. It was saying, "Hey, hey, hey." My own call, the one I'd just shouted. I stood there holding the burrito like an idiot, and my brain tried so hard to make it normal. Echo, I thought. Desert echo off the shack, off some rock formation. That's a thing, right? Sound bouncing around, but it didn't sound like an echo. An echo fades. This was steady, practiced, like something had picked up my word and was trying it on. I backed toward my truck, slow, not wanting to make sudden movements. I remember my fingers were greasy from the burrito and I wiped them on my jeans without thinking. I remember my truck's key fob felt too small in my hand. The voice stopped again. In the silence after, I could hear a different sound. A faint scraping, like something dragging across dirt. It was coming from behind the shack. I told myself it was wind pushing a piece of metal, a loose sheet, a tumbleweed, anything. My mind was throwing explanations at the dark like pebbles, trying to see what bounced back. Then my flashlight beam caught the side of the shack, and I saw a shadow move across the wall. Not big, not a towering monster silhouette. Just a head and shoulders sliding past the window line, and the movement was wrong. Too smooth, like it wasn't walking, like it was gliding but with stops, as if it didn't understand momentum. I clicked the flashlight off by accident, my thumb slipped. When I clicked it back on, the shadow was gone. I stood there breathing too loud, and I had this stupid thought, maybe it's a person messing with me. Maybe someone followed me out here for a laugh. That thought made me angry, because anger feels better than fear. I almost shouted again, almost said, "Not funny," but the scraping sound changed. It became a soft tapping, not on the shack, on my truck, 3 taps evenly spaced from the other side of the cab where I couldn't see. Tap, 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 my skin prickled, my throat tightened like I'd swallowed a handful of sand. I didn't move, I couldn't. I just stared at the truck door, and in the dim starlight I saw something slide down the window from the top edge. At first I thought it was a strip of cloth. Then my flashlight caught it, and my brain refused to assemble the image for a second, like it was buffering. It was a hand, not a human hand, not an animal paw, a hand-shaped thing, pale and dry-looking with fingers too long and too thin. The skin on it was stretched tight like parchment, and the fingernails, if you can call them that, were not nails. They were little translucent plates, layered like fish scales, catching the flashlight and throwing back a dull sheen. The iconic part, the thing that still makes my stomach do that sick flip when I picture it, was the way one finger bent. It didn't bend at the knuckle the way fingers do. It bent halfway down the bone, like the finger had joints in the wrong places, folding in on itself as if it was testing the concept of hand. Tap, tap, tap. I finally moved then, not gracefully. I lunged for the driver's door, yanked it open, and threw myself in. My knee slammed the steering column. The key fob slipped and bounced. For a second I couldn't find it, and I felt this hot wave of panic because the tapping continued, now faster, like it knew. Tap, 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 tap. I found the key, jammed it into the ignition, and turned. Nothing, not even a click, just dead silence. I'd left the lights on earlier. I drained the battery, of course I had. The most boring, humiliating explanation in the world, and it hit me like a punch. I almost laughed. I almost cried. I did neither. I just sat there with my hands shaking, listening to the tapping turn into something else. Scratching, not claws, not a frantic animal scratch. Deliberate, slow, like someone writing with a nail. The sound traveled along the side of the truck, a line being drawn. I forced myself to look out the passenger window. The flashlight beam, still in my hand, lit the outside in a harsh circle. And in that circle I saw something crouched low beside the door, pressed close to the metal. I didn't see its face, thank God. I saw its shoulder and arm and the side of a neck that looked too thin to hold up a head. The skin was the same pale parchment. It had no hair that I could see, and its shoulder blade pushed up under the skin like a knot. It leaned in toward the window, and the glass fogged from the inside. That's another detail that doesn't make sense. It wasn't cold. The night wasn't cold enough for breath fog on glass, but the window clouded in an oval, right where a face would be if there was a face. And then my voice came again, right outside the truck, so close it vibrated in my teeth. "Hey," it said, exactly the way I'd said it earlier. Same tone, same little uncertain lift. I started to think I understood it, and then I realized I didn't, because the next word it tried to say wasn't one I'd said. It was my name, not shouted, not threatening, just practiced, like it had been listening for a long time, collecting pieces. I covered my mouth without thinking, as if it could steal more words from me if I let them out. The scratching stopped. There was a pause where the whole world held its breath. Then the truck rocked, not violently, not like something slammed into it, like someone climbed onto the hood and shifted their weight. The suspension creaked. Dust slid down the windshield in thin sheets. I heard a slow drag over the roof, those scaled nail plates scraping metal. I don't know what made me do it, but I hit the horn. The sound exploded into the desert, ugly and loud and desperate. It felt like a flare. The rocking paused. The scraping stopped. I hit it again and again. Then I saw movement in the windshield, something sliding down right into the beam of my flashlight, a face. I only saw it for a second, and even now my memory tries to smear it like an oil stain. There were no eyes, I mean that literally. Not dark eyes, not glowing eyes, nothing. Just smooth, pale skin where eyes should have been, with shallow dents like someone had pressed thumbs into clay and then smoothed it over. The mouth, though, the mouth was a thin seam that ran too far past where cheeks would be, and it opened not by parting lips but by splitting like a zipper being pulled down. Inside was dark and wet, and something clicked softly like teeth tapping, but I didn't see teeth, just movement in the darkness. My horn blared again because my elbow had locked on it. The thing flinched, and I saw its hands, both of them, spread on the hood, fingers splayed, nails catching light like dull glass. And then it slid off the hood in one smooth motion like it weighed nothing. I sat there shaking so hard my ribs hurt. My truck battery was dead. I was miles from the highway. And outside, something that could say my name was standing somewhere in the dark. I did the only thing that felt like an option. I grabbed my flashlight and my tire iron, cracked the driver's door just enough to slip out, and ran for the shack. Not because I thought the shack was safe, just because it was solid. It had walls, it was closer than the road. And in a moment like that, you pick the nearest lie you can live inside. I sprinted, feet slipping in loose gravel. Behind me I heard something moving, not footsteps exactly. More like quick, soft pats on the ground like hands slapping dirt. I slammed through the shack door and threw my weight against it. The warped wood groaned. I jammed the tire iron through the handle and braced it. My flashlight beam shook across the walls, catching the ash smear on the beam, catching the little pink shoe in the corner. Then came the sound at the door, not pounding, not scratching, knocking, 3 knocks, evenly spaced, patient. Knock, knock, knock. I stood there with the tire iron in both hands, feeling stupidly like I was going to have to negotiate. Like if I answered wrong, something would happen. Like if I stayed silent, it would get bored. The voice came through the door, muffled but clear enough. "Hey," it said, softer now, almost friendly. I backed away until I hit the far wall. My mind tried again for rationality. Maybe it was a person, a cruel person with a mask. But the no-eyes face flashed in my head and my rational brain just stepped out of the room. It left me alone with my heartbeat. The knocking started again. This time it moved as if the knocker walked around the shack. 3 knocks on one wall, pause, 3 knocks on the next, like it was mapping the shape of the room. Then the tapping began on the window. Soft fingertips, tap, tap, tap. My flashlight beam swung toward it, and for a split second I saw a silhouette pressed against the glass, head and shoulders close, too close. And I saw a smear appear on the window from the outside, dragged downward slowly, leaving a trail. It was wet, dark, not thick like mud, more like saliva. The tapping stopped. Silence. I waited for the next thing, whatever it was. My lungs burned from holding my breath. Then, from somewhere inside the shack behind me, I heard the same voice again, perfectly mimicked, right by my ear. "Hey." I spun, tire iron raised, flashlight whipping across the room. Nothing, just dust and shadows and that stupid cot frame, but the sound had been inside. I know it had. It was close enough that I felt it in my skin like a whisper against cartilage. I started shaking so hard I couldn't keep the flashlight steady. I kept swinging the beam around like it could cut the dark. I remember thinking, this is it, this is how you die, panicking in a little shack because you wanted to reset. Then the door creaked, not forced, not kicked in, just the sound of wood flexing. I looked and saw the tire iron shift. The door bowed inward slowly, like something was leaning on it with steady pressure. The nails of that thing scraped the wood, and the sound made my teeth ache. I backed into the corner, pressed my shoulder into the wall, and did the most cowardly practical thing I could think of. I shut off my flashlight. The darkness swallowed everything. I don't know how long I stood there. Minutes, hours. Time gets weird when you're trying not to exist. I listened to the door creak, to the wood complain. I listened for breath, for movement. I tried to slow my own breathing until it was barely there. At some point, the pressure on the door stopped. The shack settled with a soft sigh. Nothing happened. No final jump scare moment. No cinematic crash. Just absence. I stayed in the dark until the cold of the desert night seeped into my bones and my muscles cramped. Eventually, I saw the faintest gray light through the cracks. Early dawn, that thin, watery pre-sun light. When I finally clicked my flashlight back on, my hands were numb and stiff. I moved like an old man. I listened. Nothing. I pulled the tire iron free and eased the door open. Outside, the world looked harmless again. Pale ground, pink sky, the shack casting a long shadow like it had always done. My truck sat where I left it, quiet. I walked to it slowly, tire iron still in my hand, and I checked around it like I expected to find footprints, claw marks, something obvious. The dirt around the truck was smooth. No tracks, no drag marks, just wind-brushed dust. For a minute I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. Stress, isolation, my dead phone, my own fear echoing back at me. I was already building the story where I was embarrassed by it. Then I opened the driver's door. On the inside of the door panel, inside where nothing outside should have been able to touch, there were 3 long scratches, perfectly parallel, running downward from the window control to the door handle. Clean lines through the dust and grime, as if someone had dragged those scaled nail plates across it from the inside out. That was the aftermath proof. That was the thing that shut up my rational brain for good. I didn't try the ignition again. I popped the hood, checked the battery connections like I knew what I was doing. I didn't. And then I remembered I had jumper cables in the bed, because I'm the kind of person who keeps jumper cables and never remembers where. I dragged the cables out, stared at them like they were a puzzle, and then I did something that still makes me feel pathetic. I walked. I started walking back toward the highway, carrying the cables over my shoulder like they might protect me. It took hours. The sun climbed. The heat returned. My mouth tasted like pennies. Every time I heard a rustle, I looked, expecting to see that no-eyes face behind a bush, expecting to hear my own voice call my name. Eventually, a dusty SUV came down the road, and I waved like a maniac. The driver, a woman with a wide-brim hat and a cooler strapped in back, stopped and asked if I was okay. I told her my battery died. I didn't tell her anything else. I couldn't have said it out loud without making it real in a way I wasn't ready for. She drove me back. We jumped the truck. The engine turned over like nothing had happened. I left. I didn't go back for the cooler. I didn't go back for the tarp. I didn't even close the shack door. Sometimes when I'm alone in my apartment and the AC kicks on with that same sour smell, I'll hear my own voice in my head, flat, practiced, saying, "Hey," the way it said it out there. And I'll catch myself holding my breath, like silence is the only thing I own that it can't take. Story 2. Desert nights can feel clean in a way cities never do, like the sky got scrubbed. The first time I drove that stretch of back road, I remember thinking the stars looked fake, too many of them, too sharp. The kind of sky that makes you feel small and lucky at the same time. I had the windows cracked because my sedan's AC had been making this faint ticking noise for weeks, and I kept imagining it was about to die in the worst place possible. The air smelled like creosote and dust, and something faintly sweet, like overheating rubber. I'd eaten a sleeve of those peanut butter crackers from the glove box earlier, and the crumbs were sticking to my lip gloss, which was annoying enough that I kept wiping my mouth with the back of my hand. I was out there because I'd been avoiding a phone call. That sounds stupid, but that's how it started. My older sister, Delaney, had been on me for months to come out and help her clear our dad's storage unit. He'd passed the year before, and neither of us wanted to touch the boxes that still smelled like his aftershave. I'd finally agreed, but then my job ran late, and by the time I got off, the thought of walking into her bright kitchen and seeing the "we need to talk about probate" face made my stomach twist. So I did what I always do when I don't want to deal with something. I drove. Not far, not with a plan. Just out toward the edge of town where the streetlights thin out and the world turns into silhouettes. There's this old frontage road locals used to cut around traffic and shave maybe 10 minutes off, but it's rough and half the signage is either shot up or missing. I'd taken it once in daylight. At night, it felt like driving through the underside of the world. I think it was around 11:30, midnight. I keep mixing it up because my dashboard clock was wrong by 5 minutes and I never fixed it. I remember checking my phone at some point and seeing no service, which was dumb because I'd had no intention of calling anyone. Yet the no service symbol still made me feel exposed, like the world had closed a door behind me. The first thing that made me uneasy wasn't supernatural, it was just wrong. There was a minivan on the shoulder, hazards blinking, not a new one, older model, beige like every family car from the early 2000s. The rear hatch was open, no one standing outside, no motion in the cab. The hazards were flashing in that lonely, patient way, and the light was reflecting off the road like tiny warning fires. I slowed because that's what you do. You look, you assess, you tell yourself you're a decent person. I rolled down my window more and called out, "Hey, are you okay?" No answer. I told myself they'd stepped away to pee, or they were under the hood, or they were asleep inside. People get tired. The desert is boring. Maybe they pulled over to rest and left the hatch open by mistake. As I crept past, my headlights swept the inside of the minivan. Empty seats, fast food bags, a stuffed animal on the floor, one of those floppy plush dogs, the kind you win at a carnival. The driver's seat was empty. The steering wheel was turned slightly, like the van had drifted there and stopped. I got that first cold pinch of instinct, the one you ignore because it makes life inconvenient. I kept driving. The road dipped and rose, the pavement cracked, the edges breaking down into gravel. Joshua trees showed up here and there, black hands against the sky. My headlights caught reflective bits, little stones, bits of glass, eyes that were probably rabbits or lizards, and then gone. The radio kept searching for stations, hissing and clicking like it was whispering to itself. I remember I started humming without realizing it. Not a song, just noise to fill the car. Then I stopped because the sound of my own voice in that empty place felt too loud. A mile later, my headlights hit something in the road. At first, I thought it was a branch. Desert gets weird debris after wind. But it wasn't a branch. It was a strip of fabric, pale and fluttering at the edges like a flag, a long scarf or a piece of sheet. It lay across both lanes, exactly perpendicular, like someone had placed it there. I braked, not hard, just enough to slow. My mind went, maybe it fell off a truck, maybe it's trash, maybe it's nothing, except it wasn't moving the way loose trash moves. It didn't tumble or skitter. It lay flat, hugging the pavement, and the edges lifted in little synchronized ripples like it was breathing. I told myself it was wind. Wind does weird things close to the ground. Heat does weird things too, mirages, shimmer, all that. I drove around it, giving it a wide berth. My tires crunched gravel. As my headlights passed over it, I saw there was stitching along one edge. Neat, careful stitching. Whoever made it had taken their time. I kept going, and I tried to laugh at myself. Like, okay, Claire, you're scared of laundry now. That's when I noticed the smell. It came through the vents first, even though I had them low. A smell like wet pennies and clay, not rot, not sewage, more like damp earth, which you don't really smell out there. The desert is dry, it's dust and hot rock and sunburnt plants. Damp earth is a different world. My hands tightened on the wheel. I swallowed. My mouth was dry in that chalky way that makes your tongue feel too big. And then this is where it started to tilt. I saw someone in the road. Not dead center, thank God. Off to the right, near the shoulder, just a figure standing still, facing away from me. They were wearing something light-colored, a dress maybe, or a long shirt. The fabric caught the headlights and glowed. I slowed almost to a crawl. My brain did the checklist. Stranded person, overheated person, someone from the minivan, someone playing a prank, someone who needs help. I rolled down my window and called out again, "Hey, do you need help?" The figure didn't turn. I told myself they were frozen. Shocked, or maybe they didn't hear, I inched closer. The headlights brightened them up, and that's when I realized the fabric wasn't clothing. It was skin, pale, stretched, too even in color, and it wasn't hanging the way clothes hang. It clung to the shape underneath in a way that made my stomach recoil, because the shape underneath wasn't quite human right. The torso was narrow but too long, and the shoulders sat at a strange angle, like someone had assembled them wrong. I stopped my car. I don't know why. Curiosity, habit, the dumb hope that if I paused, the world would become normal again. The figure's head tilted slightly, as if it had heard my engine settle. It didn't turn. It just tilted, slow and thoughtful, like a bird listening for worms under soil. I locked my doors. That click sounded huge. I told myself, okay, it's a person with some kind of medical issue. A burn victim, someone in a bodysuit, a performance artist. Any explanation that didn't require the word impossible. Then the figure lifted one arm. The arm was too long, not in a tall person way, in a way where the elbow seemed to be in the wrong place. The forearm bent with a smoothness that made my eyes water, like watching a joint do something it wasn't built for. It lifted its hand toward the side of its head, not touching, just hovering, as if it was remembering what a hand is supposed to do. And then it spoke, not loudly, not like a yell, just a voice carried cleanly through the night air and into my open window. Delaney. My sister's name. I felt my stomach drop so hard it was like missing a step on stairs. My whole body went cold hot at once, and for a second I couldn't even blink. I just stared. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Every rational part of me screamed that if I spoke, if I gave it anything, it would learn me. I don't know why that thought came so fast, but it did, like instinct. The figure's head tilted again, a fraction more. Delaney, it repeated, the same cadence, the same question lilt I used when I was looking for her in a store as a kid. I started to think I understood it, and then I realized I didn't, because I hadn't said Delaney's name out loud in my car. I hadn't called her. I hadn't even texted her. I'd only thought about her earlier in that tight, guilty way. My foot slid toward the gas. The figure finally began to turn. This is the iconic moment I can't get out of my head, even now, because the face wasn't a face. It had the suggestion of one smooth planes where cheeks might be, a ridge like a nose, but it was unfinished, like someone had started sculpting a person and then got bored. Where eyes should have been were shallow, glossy hollows, not holes, not sockets, more like wet thumbprints in wax. And the mouth wasn't centered. It was set too low near the throat, and it opened sideways. When it opened, it didn't open like lips. The skin split along a seam, and the inside was lined with something pale and ridged, like the gills of a fish. It flexed as it tried to form sound. Claire, it said, my name, in my own voice. Not perfectly, there was a dragging, sticky quality, like it had to wade through something thick to shape each syllable, but it was close enough that my skin crawled. I slammed the gas. My tires spun on the gravel shoulder for a half-second, fishtailing, and then caught. The car surged forward. I didn't look back. I watched the road ahead with a focus so intense my eyes hurt. In the rearview mirror, I saw the figure move. Not run, not chase like an animal. It did something worse. It folded. That's the only word I have for it. Like it hinged at places bodies don't hinge, collapsing and re-extending in a way that ate distance without looking like speed. 1 second it was standing. The next it was lower, closer to the ground, and then it was beside the lane, keeping pace in that impossible smooth motion. My throat tightened until I could barely breathe. I had the stupid thought of a spider skittering along a bathtub edge, fast but controlled. The radio clicked to life suddenly, blasting static so loud I flinched. In the static under it I heard voices, like a crowded room far away. Laughing, a baby crying, someone saying my name in a whisper. It was like the car had become a mouth for everything I'd ever heard. I punched the power button. Nothing. The static kept screaming. My headlights flickered once, twice. My car shuddered like it hit a gust, even though the air was still. And then my engine cut, just died. No warning lights, no sputter. 1 second driving, the next rolling, silence except for the static and the crunch of tires on rough pavement. I gripped the wheel so hard my knuckles ached. I tried the ignition. It turned, but the engine didn't catch. The dashboard lights dimmed, then brightened, then dimmed again like a slow blink. The car coasted. My speed dropped. The road ahead was empty, a ribbon of gray in the headlights that were fading, and on the passenger side in the thin strip of light something kept pace with me. Not fully visible, just partial glimpses, a pale shoulder, an arm, the bend of a long neck. It stayed just out of full view like it understood framing, like it knew I'd brake if I saw it clearly. It tapped the side of my car with one fingertip. Tap. A single, gentle tap like someone asking permission to come in. Then it dragged that fingertip along the window. The sound was faint like a needle on glass. My teeth hurt, my scalp tightened. I kept my eyes forward, but I could see in peripheral vision the window fogging again, that impossible fog like breath against glass. I whispered no, without meaning to, just the smallest word. The figure said it back immediately in my whisper. No. My car rolled slower. The headlights guttered and died entirely. The world outside became a dim smear of starlight. The static on the radio went silent like something had unplugged it. In the sudden quiet, I heard the desert again, windless, vast, holding its breath, and I heard the figure breathe. A wet inhale through those ridged, gill-like folds. Close, so close. I don't know why I did what I did next, but it wasn't brave. It was just reactive. I yanked the emergency brake. The car jerked. Gravel sprayed. The sudden stop threw me forward against the belt, and at the same time I flung my driver's door open and rolled out into the dirt like an idiot in an action movie, except not cool, more like panicked laundry falling off a chair. I hit the ground hard. Rocks bit my palms. My knee screamed pain. I scrambled up, stumbling away from the car into the darkness. I was thinking, create distance, get away from the doors. Don't let it trap you inside a metal box. I ran toward a low ridge I could barely see, a darker line against the darker horizon. I could feel my phone in my pocket like a useless talisman. I could taste blood where I'd bitten my tongue. Behind me I heard the car door creak, not slam, not fling open, just a slow hinge sound like someone opening it carefully. Then my own voice called out, calm as anything, "Claire, come back, you'll get hurt." I kept running. I reached the base of the ridge and found a shallow wash, a dry creek bed cutting along the side. I dropped into it, crouching low, pressing myself against the dirt wall. My breath was loud in my ears. I forced it shallow, quiet. The night smelled like dust and stone, and that damp earth scent again, stronger here, like the wash held moisture that shouldn't exist. I heard movement above the wash. Not footsteps, more like the soft pat of hands, the careful placement of weight. Then the voice came again, but different now. Not mine. It was Delaney's. "Claire, where are you? This isn't funny." I almost answered. My whole body leaned toward it, because it was my sister's voice on a back road at midnight, calling like she was lost, and some deep part of me still believed I had to fix things, still believed my job was to show up. I clamped my hand over my mouth so hard my teeth pressed into my palm. The voice softened, coaxing. "Claire, I'm scared." I shut my eyes for a second, trying to make my brain do math, do logic. Delaney was at home, hours away, asleep. She couldn't be here. This was impossible. This was... Something slid down into the wash with me. Not a jump, not a scramble. A smooth, controlled descent like it poured itself over the edge. I opened my eyes and saw it. Full view for the first and only time. It crouched a few feet away, pale skin glowing faintly in starlight. Its limbs were arranged wrong, too many angles, too much length. Its head was slightly too large but smooth, featureless in places, with those wet thumbprint hollows for eyes. The mouth seemed near the throat, opened sideways, flexing its ridged interior. It tilted its head and said, in a voice that was almost Delaney's but not quite, like a bad impression, "Why won't you help me?" The words hit something in me that wasn't fear, it was guilt. Like it had reached into the soft part of my chest where I keep all the things I don't want to deal with. That's what made it dangerous, not claws, not teeth. The way it used familiar pieces of you like bait. I didn't answer. It leaned forward and one too long hand touched the dirt between us. Its fingers pressed in, and the dirt darkened under them as if dampness was seeping out of its skin. Then it did something that still makes my stomach turn. It smiled, but not with its mouth. The skin at the cheek area pulled upward in a mimic of expression, even though there were no eyes to crinkle, no muscles where muscles should be. It was copying the idea of friendliness, the idea of comfort, and then very gently it reached toward my face. I swung my purse at it. I know, that sounds ridiculous, but my purse was the only thing in my hands and it had weight. Keys, wallet, random junk. I swung it like a weapon. It connected with the side of its head with a dull thud, like hitting a bag of wet sand. The thing recoiled, not in pain exactly, more in surprise, like it hadn't considered I would strike first. I ran, not back to the car, not toward the road, along the wash, stumbling through loose stones, using the dirt walls for balance, moving where it would have trouble unfolding itself. Behind me, I heard it move, that folding, hinging motion, quick and controlled. It kept pace above, sometimes beside, sometimes behind, voices blooming out of it in soft bursts. My mother's laugh, "My mother is alive," which made it worse. Delaney calling, my own voice begging me to stop. I ran until my lungs felt like they were tearing. Eventually, the wash widened and dumped me out near a fence line, barbed wire sagging between old posts. Beyond it, I saw a faint glow, a building, a gas station maybe. A single light buzzing miles away but real. I didn't think. I climbed the fence. The barbs caught my jeans and ripped them. They snagged my thighs, slicing skin. I hissed and kept going, dragging myself over, dropping hard on the other side. That's when the pursuit stopped. Not gradually, not fading. Just stopped at the fence line like it hit an invisible wall. I turned, panting, half crying, and I saw it standing on the other side of the barbed wire, perfectly still. It didn't cross. It tilted its head like it was listening to something I couldn't hear, and then it lifted a hand and placed its fingertips on the wire. The wire did not cut it. Instead, the wire darkened under its touch, turning damp, and a faint sheen spread along the metal like condensation. It spoke one last time in my voice, soft and conversational, like we were friends at a party. "Okay," it said. "Next time." Then it unfolded backward into the darkness, not walking away, but collapsing and re-extending until it was simply gone, swallowed by the road and the scrub and the empty sky. I made it to the little building, which was a tiny roadside rest stop with a vending machine and a single harsh light that made everything look sickly. There was a payphone that didn't work, of course. There were tire tracks and cigarette butts and a faded sign about littering. Normal things, human things. I sat on the curb and shook until dawn. When the sun finally came up, I walked back along the road toward my car with this numb determination, like if I didn't retrieve it, the night would remain unfinished and I'd be stuck in it forever. My car was where I'd left it, doors closed, sitting quiet on the shoulder. In daylight, it looked harmless, stupid even. A regular sedan on a regular empty road. I opened the driver's door. On the inside of the windshield, right in front of the steering wheel, there was a smear, like a handprint made with damp clay. 5 long finger streaks, too long to be mine, the palm area oddly narrow, the glass around it was dry. The print itself was wet, as if it had been placed there seconds ago. That was the aftermath proof, the thing I couldn't rationalize away. The engine started on the first try like it had never died at all. I drove straight to my sister's house. I didn't text, I didn't call. I just showed up on her porch at sunrise with ripped jeans and a bleeding thigh and dust in my hair. And when she opened the door, I started laughing and crying at the same time like a lunatic. I didn't tell her what happened, not then. I just asked if I could come in and help her with the storage unit. Sometimes I think about that fence line and the way it stopped there like a boundary mattered. I don't know what boundaries mean to something like that. I don't know if it was the fence or the property line or just the idea of a place where humans gather. I only know that ever since that night, whenever my phone shows no service, I feel this irrational surge of anger. Like the world is quietly taking away the one thin thread I had between me and whatever's waiting on the backroads, practicing my name. Story 3. The desert makes you honest about distance. In the city, you can pretend help is always 5 minutes away. Another car, another porch light, some open store with fluorescent aisles. Out on the backroads, it's different. The land is too big, the sky is too blunt, and you can feel how far your own body has to carry you if anything goes wrong. I learned that on a stretch of Caliche Road that wasn't even supposed to be on my route. I'd been on contract work, nothing exciting, just calibrating sensors for a small solar installation. I was the guy they sent when something kept reading wrong, and nobody wanted to spend 3 more days on site guessing. My name doesn't matter, but the job did because it put me out there late with the sun already dropping and my truck bed full of mundane junk that doesn't save you from anything. Zip ties, a roll of electrical tape, a torque wrench I barely used, a half-empty bottle of blue windshield fluid, a box of latex gloves that smelled like powdered sugar. I told my girlfriend Maricela Quintero I'd be home by dinner. That was optimistic. She made a comment, half joking, half not, about me always choosing work that takes me to the edge of the map. I remember because I'd rolled my eyes and kissed her cheek and said, "It's just panels in the dirt, babe." On the way back, I missed a turn, or I think I did. The GPS did that thing where it recalculates too late and then you're already committed. I remember seeing a sign that might have said county maintenance ends, but it was riddled with bullet holes and I couldn't swear to the words. The road narrowed, the tire tracks got softer, and the desert changed from scrubby openness into this lowland basin dotted with basalt boulders like somebody spilled a bucket of black dice. At first it wasn't scary. It was just annoying. I kept telling myself I'd loop around and reconnect with the main road in 10 minutes. I had a bag of trail mix in the console and I was picking out the M and MS like a child, tossing the raisins back in the bag because I don't like being surprised by raisin texture. My dash had this little rattling buzz that only showed up over washboard. It had been driving me nuts for weeks. I remember thinking I'd finally fix it this weekend. Then I saw the mile marker, not on a post, on a stone. It was a flat piece of basalt right on the shoulder, and someone had painted a number on it in white, 17, with a neatness that didn't match the rest of the place. The paint looked fresh, too fresh, and there was a second mark below it, like a smaller number had been scrubbed away. I slowed because it made no sense. No county puts markers on rocks like that, not like someone labeling a trail in a park. This was the kind of road you take when you don't want to be found. I told myself it was private land. Ranchers do weird stuff. Maybe it was for livestock wells or some old survey thing. A practical explanation. I wanted a practical explanation. 2 miles later, maybe less, it's hard to say because the road started snaking. I saw another stone. 16. Same white paint, same careful hand, like a countdown. That should have been my cue to turn around. Instead, I kept going because I'm stubborn in a very specific way. I hate the idea that the world can funnel me somewhere without my consent. If a road exists, I want to see where it goes. I told myself I'd just reach the next junction and swing back, that's all. The sun dropped behind a ridge and the temperature shifted fast. Desert cold is a sneaky thing. It doesn't creep, it snaps. My work shirt suddenly felt thin, and the sweat on my back turned clammy. I shut off the radio to focus on the road, and the silence in the cab made the truck feel like a sealed container, like I was driving through vacuum. The next stone said 15, and right after that, the road dipped into a shallow wash where the earth had been scooped out by old floods. The walls were only a few feet high, but the way the truck dropped into it made my stomach lift. The headlights, yes, I had them on by then, cast long, jittery shadows across the sand. Halfway through the wash, I hit something, not hard, just a bump. A dull thud under the front tires, like rolling over a thick stick. I braked and got out with my flashlight, irritated. I was thinking, great, a rock lodged under the skid plate. Great, a flat tire. Great, I'm going to have to call someone and admit I'm lost. The air outside was colder than I expected. It smelled like dust and iron. My boots crunched on gravel as I walked around the front of the truck, swinging the light under the bumper. What I'd rolled over wasn't a rock. It was a strip of rubber. A chunk of tire tread curled like a black tongue. And right next to it, half buried in the sand, was a license plate, not attached to anything, just lying there face up, reflecting my flashlight like it wanted attention. I stood there staring at it and my mind tried to keep it ordinary. Someone lost a plate, someone blew a tire and tossed the tread. People dump trash out here. Fine, But then I saw there were more pieces, another tread strip, a cracked tail light lens, a side mirror, scattered in a line along the wash like breadcrumbs. It looked staged. I felt that first involuntary body reaction, the one you don't control. My scalp tightened, my mouth went dry like I'd swallowed chalk. The desert went very quiet, the way it does right before you hear something. I climbed back in the truck and locked the doors, even though locking them felt stupid out there. I started the engine, relieved it still turned over, and eased forward. The wash opened into a wider basin, and my headlights caught the outline of something low and rectangular ahead. A structure, not a building exactly, more like the remains of one, a concrete slab with partial walls like an old pump station or a utility hut that had been gutted. The roof was gone. The walls were only chest-high. It was the kind of ruin you'd never notice in daylight because it blended with everything, but at night it sat there like a missing tooth. I didn't want to stop, but my brain wanted a marker, a sense of where I was, a place to check the GPS again to see if it had decided to be helpful. So I pulled up close, killed the headlights, and sat there in the dark for a moment looking at the silhouette. That's when I heard it, a faint clicking sound, like two stones tapped together, or like a tongue clicking against teeth. It came from the ruin. I held my breath and listened. The clicking happened again, slower, deliberate, and it made my skin crawl because it had rhythm. Not random animal noise, not wind. It sounded like a signal. I told myself it was bats, birds, something nesting in the concrete. I told myself all kinds of things because something in there is communicating was not a thought I wanted. I turned my headlights back on, and my beam lit up the inside of the ruin. There was a tarp stretched across the far wall, tied at two corners like somebody had tried to make a shade. It was old and torn, and it fluttered slightly. Beneath it sat a folding chair, one of those cheap camp chairs with cup holders, facing outward toward the road. In the chair was a backpack, and on top of the backpack, perfectly balanced, was a plastic water bottle. It was upright, full, label still on. That's the detail that made my stomach drop. Because out there, a full bottle of water is never left behind. People leave cans, people leave wrappers. People do not leave water. Water is currency. I stared at that bottle like it was a trap, and that's when I noticed the footprints. They weren't everywhere, just a few pressed into the sand at the edge of the slab. Bare feet, long toes, too long, and the prints didn't point in different directions like someone moving around. They pointed straight toward the chair as if someone had walked up to it, stood there, and then stopped. No return prints. I whispered nope to myself, which was stupid because I was alone, but it helped. I put the truck in reverse, and the clicking started again right behind my truck, not from the ruin anymore. Behind me, I froze. My reverse lights washed the basin in pale red-white, and in that light I saw something that made my brain hesitate like it didn't have the right category. A shape standing too close to the tailgate. Not tall, not towering, slightly hunched. It looked like it was wearing a draped, light-colored fabric, like a poncho. And my first thought, my honest first thought, was a person, someone in a blanket, someone stranded. I cracked my window an inch, just enough to speak without fully opening myself up, and I said, "You okay?" The shape didn't answer. It shifted forward, and the fabric moved in a way that made my stomach tighten. It wasn't fabric, it was skin, loose and hanging like a wet sheet. The shape leaned into the reverse light, and I saw the outline of its head. It didn't have hair. It didn't have a face the way we do. The front of its head was smooth except for two vertical slits that opened and closed slowly like gills drawing in air. When it inhaled, those slits widened and the skin around them puckered. It raised one arm, and the arm unfolded longer than it should have been, joint after joint, like a telescoping tool. The hand, if you can call it that, ended in several thin digits, too many to count quickly, each tipped with a hard, translucent cap that caught the light. It tapped the tailgate with one of those caps. Click! the exact sound I'd heard. I sat there gripping the steering wheel so hard my fingers hurt. My brain screamed to drive forward, but the shape was right there and my truck was boxed in by the wash walls and the uneven basin. I didn't know how much traction I had. I didn't know if I'd clip a rock and get stuck. I didn't know if it could move faster than my truck. I didn't know anything except that it was close enough to touch metal and make sound like it owned the place. Then it did something that is still, to this day, the worst part. It angled its head toward my driver's side window, slow, curious, and it clicked twice, then paused, then clicked once. A pattern, like it was trying to replicate something, like Morse code, except I don't know Morse. My brain still tried. Maybe it's an animal. Maybe it's a weird bird. Maybe. The clicking came from inside my cab, from the passenger seat. Click, click, click. I whipped my head right, expecting I don't even know what. A bug, something caught in the vent, the seatbelt latch, and in the dim light from my dashboard I saw the passenger seatbelt moving, not swaying, not settling, tightening. The belt slid through the latch mechanism inch by inch as if an invisible hand was pulling it snug. The shoulder strap lifted off the seat, rose into the air, and then pressed down again as if it was being draped over someone who wasn't there. My throat closed. My eyes watered. My whole body tried to pull away from my own passenger seat like it had become a threat. I told myself it was the retractor malfunctioning, old car stuff. Springs and tension, except my truck wasn't old and the motion wasn't jerky. It was careful, intentional, like a person fastening themselves in. Then the passenger side mirror adjusted, not vibrating, rotating. It turned on its own until it faced me. And in that mirror, instead of my own reflection, I saw the ruin behind me, concrete slab, tarp, chair, bottle. And standing in the chair's exact position, facing the road, was another one of them. This one was closer to the size of a child. Its skin hung in softer folds, and its head was tilted like it was listening. It lifted its hand and mimed holding a steering wheel, fingers curling around nothing. It opened its gill slits and made a sound, not a word, not a growl, something like breath pulled through wet reeds. The one at my tailgate clicked in response. Click, 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 click. The seatbelt in my cab tightened another inch. I started to think I understood it, and then I realized I didn't, because understanding would mean there were rules, and I couldn't see any rules except this. They were rehearsing being human around my truck like it was a classroom. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely keep them on the wheel. I didn't scream. I couldn't. My throat wouldn't let sound out. I did the only thing I could do without giving my voice away. I turned the key and flooded the basin with my headlights again, then hit the horn. The horn cracked the desert open. Loud, ugly, desperate. The figure at my tailgate flinched, not back, but sideways, like the sound pushed it on a hinge. The seatbelt in my cab went slack for a half second, like whoever was wearing it lost focus. I slammed the truck into drive and punched the gas. The tires spun, caught, and the truck lurched forward, bouncing over uneven ground. I didn't aim for the road. I aimed for open space. I hit a shallow berm and the suspension bottomed out hard enough to make my teeth clack. The undercarriage scraped. Something in my glove box flew open and dumped papers into the footwell. In the rearview mirror, I saw movement, not chasing like a sprint, but unfolding, gliding, covering ground in that stop-smooth stop way that makes you feel like the world is lagging. The clicking followed me, not behind, beside, around. Click, click from the left outside the window, click from the right just beyond the passenger door. I kept my eyes forward and drove by feel, steering around boulders, praying I wouldn't hit a wash or a ditch. My headlights carved frantic tunnels through scrub. At one point I saw a stone marker flash past, 13. So it was still counting down. Whatever road I was on, it wanted me deeper. I didn't let it. I turned sharply toward a rise where the ground looked firmer, aiming for higher elevation. My truck bounced and fishtailed. The world outside became a blur of black rock and pale sand. Then my engine cut out, just died mid-turn as if someone had reached in and pinched a wire. The truck rolled to a stop with my foot still on the gas, the pedal suddenly meaningless. The dashboard lights stayed on, dim and sickly. My headlights remained, but they flickered once, twice, like a failing heartbeat. The clicking stopped. Silence. I sat there breathing in short, painful pulls, waiting for the next thing because my brain couldn't accept that it would just end. A shape moved into my headlights, not one of the draped ones. This was different. It rose from the ground itself, from the sand at the edge of my beams, like something uncoiling. At first I thought it was a tumbleweed rolling upright. Then I realized it had structure. A spine-like line, thin and rigid, with multiple limb segments branching off it like a stick insect. It stood tall, taller than my hood, and its head was nothing more than a narrow wedge pointed down toward my windshield. It leaned closer, and the iconic detail, the one sentence that I can't say without my stomach flipping, is that its limbs weren't ending in claws or hands. They ended in tiny, perfect imitations of human fingertips, not full hands. Just fingertip pads, pinkish and ridged like actual prints, arranged at the ends of these insect-thin appendages like someone had stolen the idea of touch without understanding the rest of the body. It pressed 3 of those fingertip pads against my windshield, and then it dragged them down in parallel. Squeak. The sound wasn't glass on skin. It was dry like rubber dragging on a balloon. My teeth hurt. My eyes flooded with tears I didn't feel. My body locked up so hard my shoulders cramped. I didn't move. I couldn't, because it wasn't attacking. It was demonstrating, showing me it could do that, showing me it could leave marks wherever it wanted. The draped figure appeared at the edge of my headlights again, off to the side, watching. It clicked softly, approvingly. Click, click. I did something cowardly and smart at the same time. I ducked down below the dashboard, wrapped my arms around my head, and stayed absolutely still. No voice, no movement, nothing to copy. For a long moment, maybe 30 seconds, maybe 5 minutes, I heard nothing but the faint hiss of my own breath and the creak of my seat as my muscles shook. Then the windshield scraping stopped. I risked lifting my head. The tall, fingertip-limbed thing had backed away, returning to the sand like it was sinking. The draped figure stood farther off now, head tilted, gill slits opening and closing in slow, calm breaths. And then almost casually it clicked 3 times. Click, click, click. The same rhythm as a turn signal. My truck's engine turned over on its own, not like it restarted itself with a roar, more like it had been waiting and now it allowed the spark back. The RPM settled into a steady idle, as normal as if I was parked at a grocery store. That terrified me more than the engine dying, because it meant the problem wasn't mechanical. It was permission. I didn't waste it. I put the truck in drive and crept forward, not flooring it this time. Moving slowly felt wrong, but it also felt like the safer bet, like running would make me interesting again. I kept my eyes on the patch of ground my headlights showed, steering around rocks until I found the faint groove of the track again. I followed it out, the stones counting down, now out of order. 12, then nothing, then 9, like I'd broken the line and it was scrambling to guide me back. Somewhere near the edge of dawn, I hit a real road again. Actual pavement, a reflective sign, a distant red blinking tower light. Civilization in the form of ugly infrastructure. I didn't stop until I reached a gas station with bright lights and a soda fountain. I sat in the parking lot shaking so hard I couldn't get the key out of the ignition. When I finally did, my hands were cramped like claws. I called Maricela. I didn't tell her what happened. I just said, I got turned around, I'm okay, I'm coming home. My voice sounded thin, like it didn't fully belong to me. The next day in daylight, I went out to my truck to grab the torque wrench I'd left in the back seat. On the inside of the passenger side window, there were 3 long streaks of residue, like someone had dragged damp fingertips down the glass from the inside. The streaks weren't dust. They were oily, faintly shiny, and when I touched them, my finger came away smelling like wet clay. That's the aftermath proof that still sits under my skin, because I know I never touched that window. I'd been too busy holding my breath and refusing to speak. And every so often, this is the part I hate admitting, when I'm driving and my turn signal ticks, my body tenses because the sound is too close to that clicking pattern, too close to the feeling of being studied. Like something out there learned the rhythm of human from me and it's still practicing. Story 4. You realize how loud a motorcycle is only when it stops running. It's this massive, roaring vibration that lives in your chest, and then suddenly, nothing, just the wind and the ping of cooling metal. I've ridden the Southern Loop plenty of times. It's a good ride if you like emptiness. I was on my old Bonneville, the one with the dented tank I keep meaning to fix. I'd spent the morning dealing with insurance paperwork for my house, flood damage from a pipe that burst while I was on vacation, and my head was still full of deductibles and claim numbers. I needed the road to scrub my brain clean. I'd packed light, a single saddlebag with a bottle of water, a multi-tool, a rag that smelled like grease, and a half-eaten granola bar I'd probably bought in 2018. I was wearing my heavy jacket even though it was hot because I don't trust asphalt, and my boots were tight because I'd worn the wrong socks, thick wool socks in July. Genius move. I was about 40 miles out from the nearest junction when the engine sputtered. Not a hard clunk, just a soft, breathless cough like it ran out of ideas. I coasted. I tried to downshift and catch it, but the revs dropped to 0 and stayed there. I rolled to a stop on the gravel shoulder, right next to the remnants of what used to be a rest area. When I say rest area, don't picture vending machines and clean tiles. Picture 2 concrete picnic tables slowly sinking into the sand and a single rusted sunshade that looked like a giant, broken umbrella. There was a trash can overflowing with things that hadn't been touched in years, sun-bleached soda cups, a tire rim, a tumbleweed jammed in the opening. I got off the bike and kicked the stand down. The silence came rushing in. The sun was already dipping low, painting everything in that aggressive orange that hurts your eyes. I checked the basics. Fuel, yes. Battery, lights came on. I pulled a plug wire, checked the connection. It all looked fine. I told myself it was vapor luck, or maybe bad gas. I'd filled up at a sketchy station with pumps that looked like they were from the 70s. It happens. You wait 20 minutes, try again, and it starts. That's how machines work. So I sat on one of the concrete tables to wait. The concrete was warm, holding the day's heat. I took a sip of my water. It was lukewarm and tasted like plastic, and watched the horizon. A hawk circled way up high, tiny as a speck of pepper. 20 minutes passed. I tried the bike. Turned over enthusiastically but wouldn't catch. Just that hollow chug-chug-chug sound that makes your wallet ache. I waited another 20. The sun touched the mountains. The light turned purple and gray. The temperature dropped fast, which was a relief for about 5 minutes until the sweat on my back started to freeze. It was around twilight when I noticed the shadows on the ground weren't behaving right. I was looking at the shadow of the rusted sunshade. It stretched long across the gravel, a distorted oval. As I watched, the edge of the shadow seemed to boil, not flicker like a candle, but bubble, expanding outward in little jerky spasms. I rubbed my eyes. I told myself I was dehydrated. Staring at high-contrast light all day does weird things to your vision. It's called retinal fatigue or something. I've read about it. Your brain fills in gaps. But then I looked at my own shadow. I was standing next to the bike. My shadow lay on the dirt, long and thin. And right where the shadow of my head was, the dirt looked darker, not just shaded, wet, like someone had poured oil on my silhouette. I stepped sideways. My shadow moved with me, obviously, but the dark, oily stain where my head had been stayed on the ground, it was a perfect profile of my helmet and shoulders, burned into the dirt like a photographic negative. I stared at it. My first thought was stupid. Did I leak oil? But oil doesn't fall in the shape of a head. I crouched down to touch it. Curiosity is a dangerous thing, and the ground felt scorching hot, not warm from the sun, hot like a stovetop. I pulled my hand back, hissing. I looked around. The rest of the ground was cooling down. Just that one spot was cooking. I told myself it was some kind of chemical spill I'd been standing on. Maybe old battery acid from a trucker, maybe hazardous waste. People dump weird stuff out here. Then I heard the sound. It wasn't a roar or a growl. It was a sizzling noise, like bacon hitting a hot pan. TSSSSS. It was coming from the picnic table I'd just been sitting on. I shone my flashlight. I dug it out of the saddlebag by then onto the table. On the concrete bench exactly where I'd been sitting was a black, scorched outline of my legs and backside. Smoke was rising from it in thin, gray wisps. It smelled like burning hair and ozone. I backed away until I bumped into my bike. My heart started doing that jackhammer thing against my ribs. Something is here, my brain whispered, and it's hot. I scanned the desert with my light. Nothing but scrub brush and rocks. No people, no fires, but the shadows were wrong. To my left, near the trash can, a shadow was detaching itself from a creosote bush. It didn't look like a person or an animal. It looked like a puddle of ink standing upright. It had no depth. It was perfectly two-dimensional, a flat slice of darkness that cut a hole in the twilight. It moved by sliding, not walking. It glided over the uneven ground without bobbing, like a cursor across a screen. And wherever it passed, the ground hissed. I froze. I didn't want to move. I thought if I stayed still, maybe it wouldn't see me. That primal don't-be-prey instinct. The flat shadow stopped about 20 feet away. It was roughly man-sized, but the edges were ragged, vibrating. It turned, if a 2D object can turn, and revealed it had no face. Just a smooth, matte black surface that seemed to absorb my flashlight beam completely. The light didn't illuminate it. The light just died when it hit the blackness. Then it raised a limb. It looked like an arm, but it ended in a jagged point, like a torn piece of paper. It pointed at my bike. A second later, the gas tank of my Bonneville, right next to my hip, began to sizzle. I jumped back just as the paint on the tank bubbled. A black scorch mark appeared on the metal, spreading outward like mold, exactly in the shape of a handprint, though nothing had touched it. I ran. I didn't try the bike again. I didn't grab my water. I scrambled away from the road toward a cluster of large boulders about 50 yards out. My boots slipped on loose shale. I could hear the hiss, hiss, hiss behind me, getting closer, like a steam iron being pressed repeatedly against the earth. I dove behind the biggest rock, pressing my back against the stone, trying to make myself small. The stone was cold. I hoped it was cold enough. I waited. The sizzling stopped. Silence again, the kind of silence that feels heavy, like being underwater. I held my breath until my lungs burned. I squeezed my eyes shut, listening. Was it circling? Was it waiting? Then I saw it. Not the thing itself, but its effect. A shadow fell across the ground in front of me, cast by the moonlight over the top of my boulder. But this shadow was darker than the others. And as it touched a small desert flower, a little yellow brittle bush blooming in the dirt, the flower instantly withered. It turned black, curled in on itself, and crumbled to ash in a second. No fire, just instant carbonization. That is the image I can't scrub out of my head, that delicate yellow flower turning to gray dust just because a shadow touched it. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I pressed myself so hard into the rock I thought I'd bruise my spine. I realized then that it was hunting heat. It was drawn to warmth. My engine, my body. The sun-baked concrete. I slowly, painfully unzipped my heavy jacket. I pulled it off, shivering as the night air hit my sweat-soaked shirt. I bundled the jacket into a ball and threw it, hard away from me, off to the left into a patch of open sand. It landed with a soft thud. Immediately, the dark shape slid away from my rock, moving toward the jacket with terrifying speed. I heard the sizzling sound erupt again, louder this time. The smell of burning synthetic fabric filled the air. I didn't watch. I used that distraction to crawl in the opposite direction, deeper into the rocks, keeping low, keeping to the coldest, darkest shadows I could find. I wedged myself into a narrow crevice between two boulders. It was uncomfortable, cramped, and freezing. I tucked my hands into my armpits to hide their heat. I buried my face in my knees. I stayed there all night. Every now and then I'd hear that hiss in the distance, wandering. Sometimes close, sometimes far. Once it passed right by my crevice. I saw the darkness blot out the stars for a second. I stopped my heart. I willed my blood to stop pumping. It didn't stop. It kept gliding. When the sun came up, the world looked normal again. Just rocks, just dirt, just a broken down motorcycle by the road. I waited until the sun was fully up before I moved. I was stiff, freezing, and thirsty. I walked back to the road, keeping my eyes on the ground, terrified of my own shadow. My bike was still there, but the gas tank, the paint on the left side, was completely stripped away in a perfect hand-shaped patch of rusted, pitted metal. The metal looked like it had been aging in the ocean for 50 years. It crumbled when I touched it. My jacket was gone, just a pile of black ash and a melted zipper pull in the sand where I'd thrown it. I didn't try to fix the bike. I started walking. I walked 7 miles before a county sheriff picked me up. I told him the engine seized, and I spent the night walking. He looked at me weird. I was shivering in the morning heat, but he didn't ask questions. I sold the bike for scrap. I didn't want it in my garage. Sometimes when I walk down the street on a sunny day and I see my shadow stretching out in front of me, I catch myself stepping over the head just in case the pavement is hot. Story 5. Relationships have a sound. You know, when things are good, it's a hum. When things are bad, it's a static that sits in the room even when nobody is talking. With Ben and me, it was mostly static lately. We went camping to fix it. That was the idea. Reconnect with nature, Ben said. He's an architect, very precise, like straight lines and plans. I'm not. I work in a bakery. I like mess. I like dough. I think that used to be charming to him, but lately it just seemed to annoy him. We took his pristine 4Runner out to the salt flats, way past where the tourists stop for Instagram photos. We found a spot near a dry lake bed, miles from anything. The ground was cracked in these perfect geometric hexagons that crunched when you walked on them. It felt like walking on a giant puzzle. We set up camp in silence. Ben scolded me for not staking the tent corners at exactly 45 degrees. I bit my tongue and unpacked the cooler. I brought nice steaks, a bottle of wine, some fancy cheese. I was trying, I really was. The sun went down and the desert turned this incredible bruising blue. We got a fire going. We ate. We drank the wine. For an hour it was okay. We talked about buying a house. We laughed about his mom's obsession with ceramic frogs. I thought maybe this is working. Then the wind picked up, not a steady wind. Gusts, sudden violent shoves of air that threw sand into our wine glasses and made the fire flatten against the ground. It carried trash with it. Old wrappers, bits of plastic, tumbleweeds. One particular tumbleweed rolled into our campsite and got stuck against the tire of the truck. Ben got up to kick it away. He's fastidious about his car. "Look at this," he said, nudging it with his boot. "It's full of junk." It was. The tumbleweed had collected debris as it rolled. A candy wrapper, a piece of blue tape, a tangled length of fishing line. It looked like a trash sculpture. He kicked it hard, sending it skittering into the dark. "People are pigs," he muttered, sitting back down. 10 minutes later, I heard a scratching sound. Scritch, scritch, scritch. It was coming from the darkness beyond the firelight. "Did you hear that?" I asked. Ben sighed. "It's a lizard, Sarah, or a mouse. Relax." I tried to relax. I took another sip of wine, but the scratching got louder, and it sounded heavy, like something dragging itself. I shone my flashlight out. About 30 feet away, something was moving at the edge of the light. It looked like a pile of garbage, a chaotic mound of sticks, plastic bags, old cans, and dry brush. It was shifting, rolling over itself, but with purpose. "It's just wind," Ben said, sounding bored. "There is no wind right now," I pointed out, and there wasn't. The gusts had stopped. The air was dead still. The pile stopped moving when the light hit it. It sat there, a heap of refuse. I kept the light on it. "I think it's an animal," I said. "Maybe a coyote got tangled in trash." Ben stood up, grabbed a heavy stick from our wood pile. "I'll scare it off." Ben, don't, I said. I felt a sudden, sharp spike of anxiety. Just leave it. He ignored me. He walked toward it, waving the stick. Hey, go on, get. The pile didn't run, it stood up. That's the only way to describe it. It didn't have legs exactly. The debris just rearranged itself vertically. The sticks interlocked. The plastic bags pulled tight like ligaments. The cans crushed together to form a core. It rose up until it was taller than Ben, a swaying, rustling tower of desert detritus. Ben stopped dead. The stick dropped from his hand. I scrambled backward, knocking over my chair. Ben, get back! The thing took a step. A rusted soup can that made up its foot, crunched into the salt crust. Crunch, then another step. Crunch, it didn't have a face. But near the top, where a head should be, there was an old, sun-bleached doll's head, just the plastic face part wired onto a branch. It was upside down, the eyes were missing. It faced Ben blindly. Ben turned and ran. He didn't wait for me. He sprinted for the truck. I was already moving. I dove for the passenger door. We fumbled with handles. The thing was slow, but it was huge. It lurched toward the fire, and as it passed, it swept up more junk. Our cooler, the camp chairs, the firewood. They just stuck to it like it was magnetic. The camp chair folded itself and snapped into the entity's torso with a sickening crack. We slammed the doors. Ben jammed the keys in. The engine roared to life. What was that? What was that? Ben was screaming, his voice high and thin. Just drive, I yelled. He threw it into reverse. The lights swept across the campsite. The thing was standing right where the fire had been. It had absorbed the fire, I swear to God. Smoke was pouring out of its seams. Orange embers glowed inside its chest cavity, lighting up the plastic bags from the inside like paper lanterns. It raised an arm made of twisted rebar and burnt wood. And then it threw something at us. It was my wine glass, the one I dropped. It flew with impossible force, shattering against the passenger window right next to my face. The safety glass spiderwebbed but held. Ben stomped on the gas. We fishtailed, tires spinning on the salt, and shot off into the dark. We bounced over ruts, headlights swinging wildly. I looked back. I saw it following us, not running, rolling. It had collapsed back into a ball, a massive, burning tumbleweed of trash, and it was gaining speed, bouncing over the terrain, shedding sparks. The iconic moment, the one that makes me wake up sweating, happened when we hit a dip in the road. The truck slammed down, bottoming out. In the rearview mirror, illuminated by the red taillights, I saw the thing hit a bump behind us. It flew into the air. And as it hung there, suspended, the burning debris shifted, and for 1 second the glowing embers inside aligned to form a perfect, fiery, hollow human skeleton inside the trash. Ribs made of glowing wire. A skull made of burning plastic. Then it hit the ground and scattered. It didn't reform. It just fell apart into a trail of burning garbage. We didn't stop. We drove for 3 hours until we hit a town with a 24-hour diner. We sat in a booth under fluorescent lights, not speaking, shaking. Ben ordered coffee and let it go cold. We broke up a week later. He said we just weren't compatible. He never mentioned the thing. He refused to talk about it. But when I unpacked my bag, the duffel I'd thrown in the back seat, I found something tucked deep inside a folded pair of jeans. It hadn't been there when I packed. It was that upside-down plastic doll's face. Scorch marks around the empty eye sockets. It smelled like burnt sage and old trash. I threw it in the dumpster. Then I went back and fished it out and buried it in the backyard. I don't know why, I just felt like throwing it away wasn't enough. Like it would find its way back into another pile, another shape. Story 6. Inherited property is never a gift. It's a chore with paperwork. I'm a surveyor, so at least I knew what I was getting into when my uncle left me 40 acres of scrubland in the high desert. Or I thought I did. I drove out there on a Saturday to mark the boundaries. The plan was to subdivide it and sell it fast. I had my tripod, my GPS rover, a sledgehammer, and a bundle of lath stakes. The land was rough, lots of mesquite, rocky outcrops, and silence. There was an old homestead in the center of the property. Just a stone foundation and a chimney that looked like a jagged finger pointing at the sky. And near it, a well, an old-fashioned hand-dug well with a wooden cover that had rotted through. I parked my truck near the foundation. I ate a sandwich. I checked my email on my phone, watching the little loading circle spin. I had a text from my ex-wife asking about alimony, normal life stuff. I started working the perimeter. It's methodical work. Find the corner, pound the rebar, tie the ribbon. I like the rhythm of it. I was on the north line when I realized I was short on stakes. I walked back to the truck to grab another bundle. To get there, I had to pass the well. As I walked by, I heard a sound from the hole, a wet slap, like a wet towel hitting a bathroom floor. I stopped. I looked down into the darkness. The well was deep. I couldn't see water, just blackness. "Hello," I said, stupid habit, talking to holes. From deep down, a sound echoed back, not a voice. A mimicry of the sound I made when I pounded the stakes. Clang thud, I frowned. Echo, I muttered. Weird acoustics. I grabbed the stakes from my truck and went back to work. I told myself it was nothing. Stones falling, rats. An hour later, the sun was getting low. The shadows stretched out, looking like spilled ink. I was hammering a stake into hard caliche when I felt a vibration in the ground. Not an earthquake, localized, like something heavy moving under my feet. I paused, hammer raised. Then, about 10 yards away, a patch of dirt collapsed. It just fell inward, creating a sinkhole the size of a dinner plate. Dust puffed up. Then another collapse closer to me. Poof. It was like something was tunneling. Fast, coming from the direction of the homestead. I gripped the sledgehammer. I thought, badger, a really big, aggressive badger, or maybe a tunnel collapse from old mining. The tunneling stopped right at my boot. I jumped back. Nothing happened. The ground stayed still. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. "Okay," I said. "Okay, we're done for today." I started packing up my gear. I collapsed the tripod. I headed back to the truck. When I got to the homestead, I saw it. The wooden cover of the well had been smashed upward. Splinters were scattered everywhere, and sitting on the stone lip of the well was a thing. It looked like a massive, hairless mole rat, but human-sized. Its skin was pale pink and translucent, covered in fine white hairs. It had huge, shovel-like hands with thick black claws, but the face was the worst part. It didn't have eyes, just smooth skin. And its mouth was a circular sucker, lined with rows of small, sharp teeth like a lamprey. It was grooming itself. It was licking its forearm with a long, gray tongue. I froze. I was about 30 feet away. My truck was on the other side of it. It stopped grooming. It lifted its head. It sniffed the air, its nostrils flaring. They were huge, wet slits. It turned its blind head directly toward me. I didn't move. I reasoned, it's blind. It hunts by sound or smell. The wind was blowing toward me, carrying my scent away, I hoped. If I stayed quiet, it let out a noise, a high-pitched, chittering shriek that sounded like metal grinding on glass. Then it dropped off the well lip and onto the ground. It moved on all fours, surprisingly graceful, its belly dragging in the dust. It started digging. In seconds, it had disappeared into the earth, just a spray of dirt, and it was gone. I stared at the spot where it vanished. I thought, did it leave? Is it hiding? Then I felt the vibration in my boots again. It wasn't leaving, it was coming toward me, underground. I saw the earth bulge upward in a line, racing toward me like a torpedo in water. I ran. I dropped the tripod. I dropped the stakes. I kept the sledgehammer because it felt like a lifeline. I sprinted toward the truck, circling wide around the well. The ground erupted to my left. A clawed hand shot out of the dirt, grasping blindly. It missed my ankle by inches. I heard the snap of its jaws. I scrambled onto the hood of my truck. I didn't stop to open the door. I vaulted onto the roof. The creature burst out of the ground right next to the driver's door. It shook dirt off its pink skin. It reared up, placing those massive shovel hands on the window glass. It screamed again, pressing its sucker mouth against the glass. The suction was so strong I saw the glass bow inward. I was on the roof, sledgehammer raised, shaking. I knew if I swung, I'd probably just piss it off or break the glass and let it in. The creature sniffed the door handle. Then, and this is the moment that breaks my brain, it reached out with one claw and tried to hook the handle. It fumbled, scratched the paint, and tried again. It knew how doors worked. I looked around for an escape. Ground was its territory. The truck was a metal island. Then I saw the gas can in the bed of the truck. A red plastic jerry can. I'd used it for the generator last week. The creature was distracted by the door. I slid down the back window into the bed. Quietly, softly, I grabbed the can. It was half full. I unscrewed the cap. The creature heard the cap click. It whipped around, scrambling over the side of the truck bed with terrifying speed. I splashed the gas at it. It hit the creature's face. It shrieked, clawing at its nose and mouth. The fumes must have burned its sensitive skin. While it was thrashing, I jumped out of the bed, ran to the cab, yanked the door open, and dove in. I locked it just as a heavy thud hit the metal. The truck rocked violently. I keyed the ignition. I floored it. I didn't look back until I hit the pavement. When I got home, I inspected the truck. The driver's side door was deeply scratched. The handle was bent almost 90 degrees upward. But the proof, the thing I can't explain, was in the bed of the truck. Lying amidst the tools and dust was a single perfect tooth. It was triangular, serrated, and translucent like quartz, and wrapped around the base of it was a tiny gold ring, a wedding band, old, worn thin. I never went back to the property. I let it go to the state for back taxes. I don't care about the money. I just care that whatever is down in that well has a collection, and I don't want to be part of it. Story 7. I drive a delivery van for a logistics company you've definitely heard of, the one with the smiling arrow. The job is mostly boring, scanning boxes, dodging dogs, listening to podcasts, but sometimes the algorithm sends you on a route that makes zero sense. I had a package labeled Priority Overnight for an address that didn't exist on Google Maps. The GPS pinned it deep in the desert, off a road called Old Miner's Track. I should have marked it undeliverable. But my metrics were down and I needed the completion bonus. I turned onto the track around 4 p.m. The van rattled, dust clouded the rear window. The road wound up into the hills past abandoned mine shafts and rusted machinery that looked like dinosaur bones. The pin led me to a ghost town, not a tourist ghost town, a real one. Falling down shacks, a general store with no roof, silence so thick it felt pressurized. I parked in what used to be the main street. I scanned the package. Recipient T. Miller. No house number, just the town name. I got out. Delivery, I shouted. Hello. A shutter banged in the wind. Bang, bang. I walked toward the most intact building, a saloon-looking place. I stepped onto the porch. The wood was gray and soft. That's when I noticed the mannequins. They were standing inside the building, visible through the empty window frames, 3 of them. Old, dress shop mannequins, missing arms, paint chipping. They were arranged in a circle, facing each other. Creepy, but not supernatural. People do weird art out here. I set the package on the porch. I took the proof of delivery photo. Flash went off. I turned to leave. When I looked back at the window, just a glance, the mannequins had moved. They weren't in a circle anymore. They were in a line facing me. I stopped. I blinked. I told myself, you didn't see them right the first time. It's the shadows. You're tired. I walked faster to the van. I got in, locked the doors. I checked the mirror. The mannequins were on the porch, outside. They hadn't walked. I hadn't seen them move. They were just there, standing around the package, looking down at it. My hands fumbled with the keys. I dropped them on the floor mat. Damn it, I reached down. When I sat up, they were closer, off the porch, in the street, about 20 feet from the van, and there were more of them. 5 now. 2 new ones, smaller, child-sized, had joined the group. They didn't look like plastic anymore. Their skin looked soft, like dough, and their painted eyes seemed to be tracking me. I started the van. I threw it into drive. I hammered the gas. The van lurched forward. I aimed for the gap between them. I wasn't going to hit them, but I wasn't going to stop. As I passed one of them, the tall one in a tattered floral dress tilted its head, not stiffly, fluidly, like a snake. I sped down the dirt road. Dust billowed behind me. I checked the rearview constantly. They didn't chase me. They just stood there watching. I thought I was clear. I drove for 10 minutes, heart pounding. The road curved around a massive rock formation. As I came around the bend, I slammed on the brakes. They were in the road, ahead of me, the same group, the tall one, the child-sized one, standing in a blockade across the track. How? There was no shortcut. I was doing 40 miles an hour. They couldn't have beaten me. I stopped the van about 50 yards away. I couldn't turn around. The road was a single lane with a drop-off on one side and a cliff on the other. I reversed. Maybe I could back up to a wider spot. I looked in the rear view. 3 more of them were standing behind the van. They were boxing me in. I sat there, trapped. I grabbed my tire iron from under the seat. It felt pitifully light. The ones in front started to move, but they only moved when I blinked. I swear, I would blink and they would be 3 feet closer. Blink. Another 3 feet. It was like playing red light, green light with nightmares. I forced my eyes open. I stared until my eyes watered. They froze perfectly still, but I couldn't watch the front and the back at the same time. Thump, something hit the back doors. Thump, thump. I screamed. I didn't mean to, it just came out. Get away. The iconic moment happened then. The tall mannequin in the front, the one in the floral dress, opened its mouth. Mannequins don't have hinged jaws. This one didn't either. The plastic or dough skin just tore. It ripped open from the chin down to the neck, revealing a hollow cavity filled not with mechanics but with dry, dead desert beetles, hundreds of them. They spilled out of her throat like black vomit, skittering over her dress. I lost it. Rationality gone. I wasn't going to die here delivering a blender or whatever was in that box. I saw a gap to the left off-road, through the sagebrush, down a steep embankment that led to a wash. I yanked the wheel. I drove the van off the road. We tipped. Gravity grabbed us. The van slid sideways, bouncing violently. Metal screeched against rock. The windshield cracked. Packages flew everywhere in the back. We slammed into the bottom of the wash in a cloud of dust. The engine stalled. Steam hissed. I waited. I looked up the embankment. They were standing at the edge of the road, looking down. A silent row of observers, but they didn't come down. It was like the wash was out of bounds. I managed to restart the van. It limped. The alignment was destroyed, but it moved. I drove down the wash for miles, navigating sand and rocks until I found where it intersected with a paved county road. I quit the next day. I left the van at the depot with the keys on the seat, but here's the kicker. When I was cleaning out my personal stuff from the van, I found something in the passenger footwell. It was a single, dusty plastic finger, broken off at the knuckle. It had chipped red nail polish. I've never painted my nails red in my life. Story 8. Photography is about capturing light. But out in the desert at 2 a.m. it feels more like you're capturing darkness. I'm a landscape photographer. I chase the Milky Way. I like the isolation, usually. I was in the Alabama Hills area, big bulbous rock formations that look like melted wax. It's a popular spot, but I'd hiked way back, far from the campgrounds, to get a specific framing of an arch with the galactic core behind it. I had my tripod set up. I was running long exposures, 20 seconds, ISO 3200. Click, wait, click, wait. It's meditative. You stand there in the dark listening to the shutter. I was reviewing a shot on the LCD screen when I saw it. In the bottom corner of the frame, near a large boulder, there was a blur, a streak of gray. I frowned. Wind? No, there was no wind. Bat? Maybe. I took another shot, same framing. I checked the screen. The blur was there again, but closer. It had moved toward the camera. I looked up with my headlamp. The area in front of me was empty, just rocks and scrub. I felt a prickle on the back of my neck. I told myself it was a coyote. Coyotes are curious. They sneak up, but they usually have Aishin. I took another photo. This time I didn't wait for the timer. I just hit the shutter and stood there staring into the dark while the sensor collected light. The shutter clicked closed. I looked at the screen. There was a figure. standing 10 feet in front of the lens. It was tall, incredibly thin and gray. It blended perfectly with the granite rocks. It had no face, just a smooth surface, but its body was twisted, contorted like a piece of driftwood, and it was closer than the last shot. I looked up instantly. Nothing, empty space. I realized then I couldn't see it with my eyes. Only the camera sensor could pick it up, or maybe it only moved when the shutter was open. A quantum weeping angel. Panic is a cold thing. It makes your hands clumsy. I wanted to grab my gear and run, but I needed to know where it was. I switched the camera to live view. The screen turned grainy and noisy, boosting the ISO to max to show a real-time feed. There it was. On the screen, it was standing 5 feet away. Its long, gray arms were reaching out toward the tripod. I looked over the top of the camera. Nothing, just air. I looked back at the screen. It was inches away. I grabbed the tripod by the legs and swung it like a bat. I felt it connect with something solid. Thwack, a screech erupted from the empty air, a sound like grinding stones. The camera flew off the mount and tumbled into the dirt. I grabbed my backpack and ran. I left the camera. I didn't care. That camera cost $3,000 and I left it in the dirt without a second thought. I scrambled over rocks, sliding, tearing my pants. I kept my headlamp off because I had this irrational feeling that light made me a target. I navigated by starlight and terror. I could hear footsteps behind me. Heavy, crunching steps, but whenever I glanced back I saw nothing. I reached a narrow canyon, a slot between two massive rock walls. I squeezed through. It was tight. I had to turn sideways. Halfway through I got stuck. My backpack snagged. I pulled. I yanked. I was breathing in jagged gasps. Then I felt a hand on my ankle. It was cold, stone cold, and rough like sandpaper. I screamed and kicked backward. My boot connected with something hard. The grip loosened. I ripped the backpack strap, abandoning the bag, and squeezed through the gap. I burst out the other side and ran for the parking lot. I made it to my car. I locked the doors. I turned on the headlights. The beam illuminated the canyon entrance. Nothing was there. I drove home. I didn't sleep for 2 days. I kept expecting to see it in mirrors, in windows, in screens. 3 days later, a hiker found my camera. They turned it into the ranger station. The ranger called me. My info was on a sticker on the body. I went to pick it up. I didn't want to touch it, but I had to know. The lens was smashed. The body was scratched. I pulled the memory card. I put it in my laptop. The last photo, the one taken when the camera hit the ground, was angled upward. It showed the night sky. And looming over the lens, out of focus but unmistakable, was a face. It wasn't smooth anymore. It had opened. The face was split into 4 quadrants, peeling back like a flower, and inside was a single, giant, unblinking human eye. Just one, staring right into the lens, but the proof, the physical thing, was on the camera strap. When I got it back, the nylon strap was stiff. It was encrusted with a gray, lichen-like substance that smelled like ozone. I scraped some off and put it in a jar. It glows faintly in the dark. I keep the jar in a lead-lined box in my garage. Story 9. Grief makes you do stupid things, like driving 4 hours into the Mojave to visit a grave that nobody has visited in 20 years. My brother Tom and I were looking for our dad's plot. He was buried in a tiny, forgotten cemetery near an old mining camp called Goldfield. Don't ask why. Dad was eccentric. He liked the idea of sleeping with the prospectors. We arrived at sunset. The cemetery was just a fenced-off patch of dirt with tilted wooden crosses and a few stone markers. The wind was howling, whipping sand into our faces. It felt hostile. We found the grave. It was overgrown with sagebrush. We started clearing it. Tom was quiet. I was crying a little, mostly from the wind. "We should have brought flowers," Tom said. "Plastic ones," I joked weakly. "Real ones wouldn't last an hour." The sun dropped. It got dark fast. We headed back to the car, a rental sedan parked on the dirt track. As we approached the car, I saw someone sitting in the back seat. My heart stopped. "Tom," I whispered, "there's someone in the car." Tom stopped. He squinted. Who? The figure inside was shadowy. But then the interior light flickered on weirdly on its own, and I saw him. It was Dad. Not Dad as he was when he died, sick, frail, gray. Dad from 30 years ago, wearing his favorite flannel shirt, looking healthy, smiling. He waved at us. I grabbed Tom's arm. That's not possible, I hissed. That's not him. Tom was staring, entranced. Dad, he called out. The figure nodded eagerly. He pointed to the empty driver's seat, pantomiming for us to get in. Come on, let's go. I felt a cold dread wash over me. It wasn't fear of a ghost. It was something more primal. It was the uncanny valley effect hitting me like a truck. Because the smile was too wide. It showed too many teeth. Tom, don't go near it, I said, but Tom was walking toward the car. It's a sign, Julie, he's here. Tom, I yelled. Tom reached the car. He opened the driver's door. Dad turned his head to look at Tom, and his neck kept turning, past the shoulder, past the back. A full 180 degrees, crack, crack, and then his face dissolved. It didn't melt, it scattered like a flock of moths dispersing. The flannel shirt collapsed, and underneath was a swirling mass of black particles, buzzing, humming, holding a vague human shape. Tom screamed and stumbled back, falling into the dirt. The swarm poured out of the back seat. It didn't fly. It flowed like a liquid, swarming over the center console, filling the front seat. I ran to Tom, grabbed him by the collar, and dragged him up. Run! The keys! Do you have the keys? In my pocket, Tom yelled. We couldn't get to the car. The thing was in the car. It was claiming it. We ran into the desert, blindly, away from the cemetery, away from the car. Behind us, the car horn started honking. Beep, beep, beep. Long, sustained blasts. We hid in a dry ravine about a mile away. We huddled there, listening to the horn blare for 20 minutes straight until the battery must have died. We walked 10 miles to the highway. A trucker picked us up at 4 a.m. We told him our car broke down and we got lost. We had the rental company tow the car the next day. They called us later, angry. You guys trashed the interior, the manager said on the phone. What do you mean? I asked. It's filled with sand, he said, like packed with it, and there are cocoon casings everywhere. Like moth cocoons. Hundreds of them stuck to the upholstery. That was the proof. The cocoons. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed these stories, hit that like button and subscribe for more. Let me know in the comments which story unsettled you most, and share this with your friends who love a good scare. Until next time, stay safe out there.